Well, welcome in to the Storycraft Cafe and to our Dabble Premium Month launch. I am super excited. I'm Hank Garner, as always, your host. Super excited today to have Michael Ronn back on the show with us. Michael is an old friend that we've gotten to connect a number of times over the years. Always a pleasure to get to hang out with Michael and pick his brain. There's so much going on up there. Um, Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Hey, Hank, it's always good to be with you.
Thank you. We had a little trouble getting some calendars synced there for a little bit. I had something come up, you had something come up, but we're here now, and we are super excited to get to hang out with you some more, Michael. I always love to start with a fun question to kind of set the tone for the show, and one thing that I got to thinking about earlier today when I was thinking about talking with you, is you have been in the author and indie author space for quite a while now, and you have seen all of the ebbs and flows of the changing of markets, the changing of the publishing tools and the platforms and all of that. And a question that really kept coming up to me is, do you, as a storyteller, as someone who wants to tell stories, and this is aside from all of the publishing and all of the machinations that go along with that, are you as passionate today about telling stories as when you began?
Oh, I'm more passionate, 1,000% more
Yeah,
passionate. I think this is, if you're in this for the long haul, like I
yeah,
am, writing is like a fine wine that never gets uncorked, right? It just continues to become sweeter and sweeter throughout the years, and you become more eloquent and articulate and passionate about what you're doing, at least if
yeah,
you're doing it right. And
right,
there are times, and I will confess, there have been times where, gosh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, it's a
right.
challenge. And
Yeah,
and that's part and parcel to the occupational hazard of writing, which we can talk about, which is
yeah,
your brain tries to play tricks on you. But generally speaking, if you're doing it right, you're getting better as a artist, as a craftsperson. And so why wouldn't you enjoy that journey? So yeah, short answer is that I'm 1,000% more passionate. And the reason for that is because I feel like with every new story I'm telling my best story. And my best, best being, what is it going to be when I'm 6 feet under? I don't know
right,
what that's going to be. Right. And
right.
that's encouraging to me. And so I just love this life and love everything about it.
I love it. I love it. That was an answer that I was hoping that you would give, and I was pretty sure that you would say something along those lines. One of the last times we talked, you were um, busy, 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 busy. Full time job, law school, raising a family, writing books. Has your life calmed down any since then?
Just a tad,
Just
not much. You can take the law school out of the equation. I did graduate, so I'm
congratulations.
thank you. So I have that gone, which is a huge amount of time that I have back,
Yeah.
and I can't still haven't truly been able to appreciate how much time I have back since I'm not studying law books and cases and things like that. So that's been big. I taken some different jobs, which has opened up some things for me in terms of time, and so
Yeah.
that's good. And I think mentally, I'm in a better place, spiritually, emotionally. I'm in a really good spot, even though I'm still busy with a capital B.
Yeah,
But
but just as a
I'm the kind
whole
of
person,
person.
you're feeling good.
Yeah, as a whole person. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah,
If you rate me as a whole person, I feel like I'm better than I was the last time we talked, which is good.
yeah, yeah, that's amazing, that's amazing. Do you still consider yourself primarily a science fiction and fantasy author?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. About 60% of the books I've written have been science fiction and fantasy. And long term, my goal is, while I do write some self-help books for writers and books
mhm,
that writers have enjoyed, which is one of the reasons I'm here, right?
sure,
That I don't want to be one of those people that just talks and talks about writing but never does it. I'm very big on living my
right,
philosophy. And so
right,
long term, what the distribution looks like for me is somewhere between 80 to 90% science fiction and fantasy.
Love it.
And the rest is writing and poetry and any other trivial pursuits that I want to go after.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because, there can as someone who works, in writing and writes, you can get very busy doing great things, that all are that support the writer community, that put stuff into the community, of writers and not actually write. You can get so busy doing good that you don't do the thing that you signed up, for in the first place. So, how do you structure your day so that you make sure you maintain space for creativity and writing, and to make sure that your creative pursuits, are maintained without just giving everything in you, over to the other side?
Oh, that's such a great question. You always ask such thoughtful questions, Hank. So yeah, you're right. You can be super busy doing good for others that you don't do good for yourself.
Right. Right.
And my schedule is, for lack of a better word, I hope you don't mind me letting my hair down a little bit. My schedule
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. I'm an executive in the insurance world. Um,
Yeah.
I've got a 9-year-old daughter that has activities, and I take her all over the place. I'm married. I'm a dutiful husband. Son, grandson. I mean, I've got a bunch of pets. I've got a dog. I've got a rabbit. I've got a turtle. There's things that they need from me constantly.
Right.
Like, my one day does not look the same.
Yeah.
So I can tell you generally what it looks like. And generally, although I have been sleeping in late a lot more lately since I finished law school, generally I'm up about 2 hours or so before I work. And that gives me some time to exercise, gives me some time to write, gives me some time to kind of have the house to myself. And I put as much time into that as I can for writing. Right. So that could be emails, it could be writing. Most of the time it is writing. Right.
Mhm.
And I have learned to do what my friend Ryan J. Pelton says, which is write in the cracks of life. So I have a dog, and my dog is super lucky because I walk her probably about 90 minutes to 2 hours a day. And while I'm walking her, I'm dictating my books, or I'm listening to audiobooks, and I'm doing
Yeah.
something to further my craft. And it gets my dog super tired. She loves it. My wife loves it. My dog doesn't go around the house destroying stuff. And so, it works out. And, I don't take her on a 2 hour walk. It's,
Sure.
a walk in the early morning, walk in the mid morning, dinner time. I probably walk my dog more than most people do, but I do
Yeah.
that so that I can get some exercise because I need to lose some
Yeah.
weight. And then I also get the writing in. I also do writing. I dictate when I'm doing my dishes. So dishes are my ceremonious responsibility, and we make lots of them because we do lots of cooking. And so when I'm doing my dishes, I'm usually dictating a chapter in my book, and I can get anywhere from 750 to 2,000 words in a dishwashing session.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and so when I do laundry, I'm dictating. So when I'm folding my clothes, I'm dictating. So I'm taking the family responsibilities and the things that I'm already doing, and I'm just reclaiming them and refactoring them to support my writing. And so then, late at night when I'm back down at the computer and everybody's asleep, or we've got some downtime, then I get some words in at the keyboard, right? And so all of that adds up. And then we haven't even talked about what happens when I'm at the grocery store and I'm standing in line and there's a long line, or I'm at the doctor's office, or I'm in the backseat of an Uber car. I'm writing on my phone, picking up where I left off in my dictation sessions. And so I've had to learn to retrain my brain to write in the way that suits my busy lifestyle. And in doing that, it adds up pretty quick, right? So when
Yeah.
you dictate, the average person can type, I think it's like 50 words per minute or something like that. But the average person can speak 150 words per minute. So just by speaking your stories, you're automatically writing 2 to 3 times faster.
Right.
And, so anyway, long way of saying that I try to write in the cracks of life, and that has served me amazingly well. And I'm the textbook of a person who should not who should not have a writing career.
Yeah,
Like of
right.
all the stuff I did, you said, I said, hey guys, I'm throwing in the towel. It's been nice. See ya so long. Thanks for all the fish. I don't think anybody would blame me, you know. But
Right.
I'm kind of an anomaly. I shouldn't have a writing career, but I do because I make the time in the time that I would probably be on Facebook doom scrolling anyway.
Right, right. Um, Chris Fox, published that book. I don't know, it's been 5 or 6 years ago, Write 10,000 Words an Hour, I think it was, and his,
Yeah.
and his great trick was dictating. And, I've gotten to know Chris, really well, and we've had lots of conversations about it, but dictation is it's one of those interesting things, and I remember you and I had a conversation years ago where you had figured out that you could on your phone while you're shopping with your wife, and she's, I think you used the example of she's in the dressing room trying on things, you could pull your phone out and you could, write a scene, on your phone. Um, so and it sounds like you still do that. You still have that tool in your tool belt, but you've added dictation as another tool in your tool belt, and then you have your computer where you sit down and write, and that's another tool in your tool belt. And so it sounds to me like you are collecting all of these tools like a craftsman does, instead of the guy that just has a screwdriver and a hammer in a junk drawer in the kitchen, and whatever breaks around the house, it's either going to get the screwdriver or the hammer. But as you mature and you try different things, you collect more tools, and you find that there are appropriate times where one thing works here, one thing works there, and those things all add to the building of a great writing career.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And one of the things that I talk about a lot when I talk to writers is, yes, I have mastered some tools that are a little unusual, right? I mean, most people think about writing sitting in front of their computer. Yeah, dictation has a learning curve. Yeah, learning how to write on your phone has a learning curve. It's not quite the same. But what if it were true that you could write your books anywhere you are, no matter where you are? Well, I said the
Right.
same thing twice. What if you could write your books anywhere you are at any time?
Yeah.
So instead of having a writing method per se, you change your writing method like a craftsman changes their tool to suit the task at hand. So if you're
Yeah.
sitting at a restaurant, why not get out your phone? If you're on a long hike, why not recommission some of that hike to your writing time?
Yeah.
And it's a mindset shift, but it makes such a difference because at the end of the day, one of the things I tell people is that the math always works in your favor. As long as you write more than you do not write, it does not matter if you only get 100 words on your phone that day,
Right.
right? So say you normally write 1,000 words at the keyboard and you're at the doctor's office and you pull out your phone and you get 100 words. Ah, that doesn't feel like it was much. Okay, but multiply that number by 365. If you did that every day or even just 5 days out of the week, you would have a big chunk of a novel
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
And that's
Or
just
a decent
into
novella if that's your goal.
a decent novella or whatever
Yeah.
whatever it is you want to write and whatever you want your career to look like, right? Whatever you're writing on your phone, the numbers add up in a dramatic way. And that is the beauty of this. So like I said, when you sit down and you do it more often than you do not, amazing things happen.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of questions that have popped in. I'm just gonna. Nikki says, "Hello, Mr. LaRon. What did you do to get in your good place?" And I don't know what Nikki means by this exactly, but because I've known you for a few years, this has been a growth process that it took a lot of things to get you in your good place. I think. How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I'll answer it from a couple of angles real
Okay.
quick, because I think you can define it a couple of different ways. There's the career part of good. There's the emotional slash spiritual part of good, and then there's the crafts part of good, right? So from a career perspective, just continuing to publish books and pay attention to what the market is doing, and not be afraid to advertise, not be afraid to market, try new things. I've been able to do that, and I've had different series that have been successful, and so that has been a good thing, right? But that it took me a lot of books to get to that point. I like to joke that I took the scenic route until I figured out where I fit in the marketplace. I was
Yeah.
always kind of a weird little misfit, and so I finally settled down in urban fantasy, and that's going pretty well for me. So that was what I did to get to the good place from a career perspective, right? From a emotional, spiritual perspective, going to therapy. I don't. I'm not shy about talking about that. I think that
Mhm.
writers, we are so gifted, and we have this amazing emotional, empathetic skill set because we can
Right.
turn words into emotions. But we are not so good about addressing our own emotions and
Right.
the things in our lives that have driven us to write. In many cases, we write to run away from things. And so the moment we stop doing that and recognize that, hey, we should take care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, whatever that looks like for you. Therapy is one way that I've done that. And, I've done talk therapy. I had a podcast for a while where I talked about my experiences with that, just some of the issues that I had as a kid growing up. And that was amazingly helpful. It gave me an emotional skill set toolbox that I could use that helped me in all areas of my life. And then from a craft perspective, just continuing to study the craft. So taking courses, Dean Wesley Smith at WMG Publishing, I've taken a lot of his courses. He's helped me a lot in terms of learning how to write better and write prose that's more emotionally resonant. That's been
Yeah.
helpful too. So I hope I've answered your question, Nikki. Tried to answer it from a couple of different angles.
We've got another one I'm gonna pop up here from Rosin. I hope I'm saying your name right. Would you share with us which dictation software you use? My phone's onboard speech to text always comes out as gibberish, and I'll say that I use a Google Pixel phone, and the built-in voice text in the Google keyboard, the Gboard, I think it's called,
Mhm.
does wonderfully well for me. I don't dictate as much as you do, but it's something I'm getting into, and it seems to be really good at voice recognition. What are you using, Michael?
Yeah, I change my dictation tools kind of like a snake changes their skin. So primarily, I use Dragon. Okay,
Okay.
and what I do is for those who are just listening, I've got a little voice recorder, and I hook this up to my lap, or I put it in a harmonica neck holder, and I just speak my stories as I walk. And then when I get home, I upload that into Dragon, and Dragon transcribes everything. All right. Now I do some voodoo. I kind of have an intense personality. My method is not for the faint of heart in terms of how I
Sure.
clean up all my text. I use
Yeah.
Microsoft Word macros. There's some programming that goes into it. It's complicated, but that gives me extremely clean text. Right. And I actually wrote
And
a
these
book
are things
on it.
that have come out of you doing this for a while, and you figuring
Absolutely.
out that these are things that make my life easier and better.
Exactly. So Dragon is the tool that I use, but that's because I have a Mac and a Windows computer. There are a lot of
Gotcha.
people that don't have Windows computers and or don't want to mess with Dragon. And so
Right.
what the question is, what do they do? And the answer is that there are a lot of apps that are popping up like mushrooms right now for Mac.
Mhm.
A ton of them. I think one of them is called I forget what it's called, Whisper Mac, that a lot of people are using, and that
Okay.
uses the Chat GPT OpenAI models to
Okay.
transcribe, or actually Whisper OpenAI models to transcribe. And even some cases, some of these apps will allow you to edit your text as well after you're transcribing it. So there's never been a better time if you're a Mac user. Like literally a year and a half ago, I would have said Mac users are just kind of SOL. There's really not much you can do, but AI has enabled a lot of new apps to come out. And so I just encourage people. ICO is another one. It's on the phone.
Mhm.
AIKO. I've used
Okay.
that's pretty good. It's got pretty good accuracy. So just look around and see. I wrote a book called How to Dictate a Book, and I'm going to do a new edition, but in that
Okay.
I'm going to probably go through some of the apps in the near future. So if anybody want some app recommendations, feel free to reach out to me and just kind of let me know what operating system you've got, and I can maybe steer you in the direction of some apps that I've heard of.
And this would probably be a good time to mention, and we should have mentioned at the top, that kind of your central location on the internet is authorlevelup.com. Is that kind of the easiest place to find all the
Yeah.
stuff that you do?
Yep.
Great.
Authorlevelup.com, and you can just go to the contact form.
Great, great. You were talking about, finding the cracks in life and writing during then. Um, how does your family feel about your writing career? And was there ever a growing pains process? When you're getting married and you're juggling time for everything else, plus trying to maintain a healthy relationship with your wife, and then your daughter comes along, and you've got to factor that in as well. How does your family look at your writing career, and do you have open uh conversations about this is also dad's work, and like how do you juggle how your family feels about what you do?
Yeah, well, my family's very supportive of my writing. There were definitely growing pains in the beginning because the
Sure.
technology we have now didn't exist then, and so you
Yeah.
literally had to be in front of your computer. And we are in a profession where you have to sit in a dark room for long periods of time and make stuff up. And
Right.
you kind of can't do that when you kind of can't be present with people when you're doing this. I mean, you kind of
Right.
can, but you're not really there, right? If you're working on your book. And so yeah, it was a growing pain, and one of the things that, we did is, like, with my wife and I, we kind of set aside some times when my wife would know I was writing and she wouldn't bother me, and in the times when I wasn't writing, I was with her, and we would do the things that we wanted to do as a family. And so there's a bit of a love language that you have to develop with your spouse,
Sure.
particularly if your spouse is not of the writing persuasion. And there sometimes that can be a challenge because sometimes there's some resentment. I've talked to other writers who have said, "Hey, I was married to somebody and they kind of resented the time that I spent writing." And
Right.
that's real. But at the end of the day, you've got to have some sort of a love language. It's a give and pull,
Yeah.
push and pull kind of a thing. And so, yeah, long story short is my family is very supportive. But one of the reasons, it's another good reason to try to write in the cracks of life is because
Sure.
when I'm writing and doing dishes, I'm doing dishes. Happy
Right.
wife, happy life, right? So
Right.
I'm not actually taking any time away from my family when I'm doing those things in
Sure.
the cracks of life. So that when
Yeah.
I am with my family, I'm with my family. And, when I'm writing, I'm actually dictating quite a bit of words per day. So I've got a very healthy word count to show for the end of the day, even if I
Yeah.
don't actually sit down in front of the computer to write.
Yeah. When you started dictating, this question just kind of came to me. There's something interesting that happens when you train your brain. That either when I sit at my computer, and some people light a candle, some people do whatever it takes to s- turn those switches on that let your brain know, okay, now I'm in creative mode. Some people have to write in the same spot every day, and when they sit down at this spot, their brain kicks in. Okay, this is where we are. This is what we do. When you start dictating, those are entirely different brain muscles that you're using. Was it difficult to get into the mode of thinking and saying your story, where a lot of times as writers we learn to kind of think through our fingers? That there's something about the tactile method of typing where this connection in our brain comes from. But when you're dictating, all those bets are off. Was that a difficult process to retrain yourself and to get into that creative flow when you're just standing there talking to yourself?
Oh, sure, sure. I remember, when I first started dictating, I was using Dragon for Mac,
Okay.
and it wasn't really that accurate, and
Mm.
it wasn't very good. And so
Right.
I said, you know what, I'm committed to figuring this out. And so what I found myself doing is I would dictate, and then because the accuracy was so bad, I find myself taking over at the keyboard. And I
Mm.
realized, hey, I caught on to what I was doing after a while, and I said, you know what, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to put my hands on my lap and I'm going to dictate a piece of, a couple chapters that I had written previously, and I'm
Yeah.
going to dictate them until I can dictate them with like 98% accuracy. And it was really frustrating because I would not allow myself to put my fingers on the keyboard. And it felt like I would do a dictation session and I would just walk away and my brain was just like fried.
Mm,
But after about 2 weeks of doing that consistently for about 2 hours, dictating the same thing over and over and over again, I relearned how to speak, and my brain started being able to do it automatically without me having to think about, okay, I need to say, hey, comma, Hank, exclamation point, how are you,
right.
question mark, new line. It just becomes like riding a bicycle,
Right.
but you have to do that first. And there comes a point where your brain breaks and then it's just never the same, and then you never have a problem. So, but everybody getting to that point where you completely addle your brain to where you can dictate anywhere and you can speak what comes to your mind, that is a process. And a lot of people are afraid of that because they don't think they can get there. But once you get there, you never forget it. So I went 6 to 8 months without dictating, and it only took me like 2 or 3 sessions to pick up where I left off, right? In terms
Nice.
of getting back into the muscle memory of being able to speak what I like to call Dragonese.
Yeah. Do you find that the words you dictate, versus the words that you type, are they different? Do you because there is a little bit of thinking differently when you speak versus when you type. Do you find that there's any disconnect there, or is that just part of the retraining process that now you speak the way you write?
It's there is a little bit of a difference. Sometimes I go on a little too long when I dictate, and sometimes I do have more filler words when I'm dictating. Not so much like ums or ahs or anything like that, but
Yeah,
just extraneous words that don't belong in a sentence. Where I'll say something very verbose in ways that it doesn't need to be said. Right? I could
yeah,
say it an easier way, and I think that's just because that's how we talk. Like if we listen
right.
to ourselves and how we talk, we are a lot more off the cuff. Whereas when we're typing, we can be a little bit more deliberate about what we're saying and more thoughtful. And so, sure, that definitely happens. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to edit everything and go back through it anyway. So it's never really
Yeah,
been a huge concern.
yeah. You mentioned Dean Wesley Smith earlier, and he has this great method that he likes to refer to as writing into the dark. And I've heard you speak about that some in the past, and I think that you have a book about pantsing.
I do.
Um,
Yes.
yeah,
The Pocket
I
Guide to
thought that
Pantsing.
the Pocket Guide to Pantsing. Thank you. I was grabbing for the title and I couldn't quite reach it. Um, folks would we hear a lot in the writer community about the importance of plotting, planning, outlining, however you want to categorize that. And we hear all the time that if you're going to be a successful author and really churn out product, like you have to do to compete in today's publishing market, you've got to have a plan, you've got to stick to the plan, and that's what's going to help you rapid release and all of the strategies that are bandied about in publishing now. Um, but you seem to be able to do all the things without having to fall into those conventions. Wh- Tell me a little bit about your ideas about planning versus pantsing, and how you maintain a consistent work output while not following the typical formula.
Yeah. Well, I have to caveat my answer with saying that I am USDA certified crazy when it comes to this because I dictate my
But that's why
books
we
into
love
the
you,
dark.
Michael.
Yeah, I dictate my books into the dark. So when I'm dictating, I have no idea what's going to happen next. And that's fun for me. A lot of people would be
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, that's so scary." That's fun for me. And so I try to sometimes I have word count goals. Other times I don't. I'm just happy to be able to write every day.
Yeah.
So if I'm really motivated and I'm really ambitious, I'm going to be shooting for about 2,700 words a day, and I'll be happy if I get about 2,500.
Yeah.
So really, for me, it's just about following my fingers or following my tongue in terms of where the story goes next, and that takes a certain amount of faith and a certain amount of confidence in yourself to be
Mhm.
able to do that. And I think ultimately, plotting versus pantsing, whether people like to admit it or not, comes down to how much faith you have in yourself to be able to tell a story.
Yeah.
It
It
and,
it
and
comes
that's
down
not
to
to that's not
fear.
to say, yeah,
Yeah.
it comes down to fear. That's not to say that because you outline. I'm not trying to be simplistic here. I'm not saying that just because you outline your stories, you're afraid, and
Right.
just because you don't outline your stories, you're not. I'm not trying to draw that simplistic argument, but I am saying
Yeah. That
that
could be a
people
little
who,
bit reductive.
yeah, people who think that they can't write without an outline, it's usually coming from fear. And pantsing or writing without an outline, whatever you choose to call it, writing into the dark, they're all terms for the same thing.
Yeah.
There are certain people who resonate with that way of life, and there
Mhm.
are certain people who do not. And if that's you, then you now have permission to explore it. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to write a book a certain way. And for those people, those are the people who find Dean Wesley Smith. Those are the people who find my book. Those are the people who find a lot of the resources on pantsing, and they feel so validated because they felt like they were jamming a square peg into a round hole all these years, and they felt like they were doing something wrong when they were writing an outline and finding out, hey, I don't really want to do this. My character's taking me
Yeah.
a different direction, and they were feeling guilty about it. And they suddenly find out, wait a minute, yeah, I don't have to do that. That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And ironically, the biggest irony about all of this is that, like, Dean Wesley Smith's book, my book, um, provide structures on how to write without an outline.
Right.
So writing without an outline is the most unstructured thing I can think of, certainly.
Y
But
Right.
yet the most popular, they're popular books because they provide a structure so that you can live your life unstructured, if that makes sense.
Right.
Once
Right.
you learn what the steps are, then it becomes infinitely easier. So for me, I find that the more I write into the dark, the more I learn about myself, because writing for me personally is about self-exploration. So the more I
Right.
do it, the more I learn about myself, and the more confident I become in who I am and stepping into who I'm meant to be. And that resonates with a lot of people. And so if anything I've just said resonates with you, then you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. The first
Yeah.
book you write is going to be rough. It's not
Yeah.
going to be fun. It's not going to be an enjoyable experience, but then it gets easier. Just like the first time you write a book, it's not easy. But then the second time you write a book, it's a lot easier. It's not, you
Right.
know, it's not a
Right.
walk in the park, but it's a lot easier. And so the more
Yeah.
you do it, the easier it gets.
And one thing I love about your method is you actually do, outline, but you outline as you write,
Yes.
which I find intriguing, which, I love that idea, of creating the roadmap as you go. And if we're talking about writing tools, like Dabble, one of our best features is the plot grid, and which
Yeah.
really helps people visualize how to outline their novel. Well, I usually just kind of fill mine in as I'm writing, and when I heard you talk about that, that's a validation for the way that I just naturally feel about. I like to kind of put some markers out, of for the journey, and but have no idea how I'm gonna get to those markers, and that's kind of what I love, the creative tension of not knowing where it's gonna go, but, maybe having uh, a goal on the far distant horizon. Now, how do I get there? I don't know, but let's
Yeah.
figure it out, That's, Nikki just, commented, she said, "I hate outlining. I've hated it since high school. It actually gets in the way of my thought process for what I'm writing." I think a lot of people would agree
Yeah.
with
So
you,
Nikki
Nikki.
knows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nikki
Well,
knows.
and for those people whose brains broke a little bit when you said I outline as I go, I just want to clarify that I'm not outlining anything before.
Right.
right? So it's I
You're
write chapter 1, and then when I'm done with chapter 1, I go back and I wrote what happened in chapter 1 in the outline. And the reason I do that, and the reason you would do that, is it's an efficiency play, right?
yeah,
So I'm willing. So actually outlined my first 10 novels. So I understand the outlining world quite well. In
sure.
fact, one of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel is how to outline your novel in 10 ways. So I get outlining. So here's a problem that you have with outlining, particularly if you write series. So let's say that you outline your book and you publish your first book and a certain amount of time passes. I'm willing to bet that most people do not go back and revise their outline to match what they ultimately wrote in the book.
Right.
So now a certain amount of time has passed and you're going back to book 2, and now you don't have any resource that serves as a Bible as to what happened in book 1. And
Right.
so all that time you spent outlining your book really didn't do much. I mean, it might have helped you finish the book, but it doesn't serve any purpose after you're done, right? But when you outline as you go, you now have a resource that you can use as a Bible to help you remember what happened in the book.
Right.
And so it's an efficiency play as well, so that you're never going to remember the story more than when you finish that chapter, right? So capturing those details in the moment not only helps you as you're writing the book, but it helps
Right.
you down the road when you get to book 7 or 8 and you need to remember what happened in book 1 without having to
Right.
go back and reread book 1. So I'm a big guy on efficiency. That's, I
Sure.
don't like to waste a whole lot of time. And so
Yeah.
that's one really good reason that you would do that.
Yeah. And you talk about a process that you call cycling or looping. My friend Steve Bowyer calls it onion writing, where he
Yeah.
describes it as writing kind of the skeleton of the scene as much as you know, and then go back and fill in details, and then go back and just kind of keeps doing layers. And it sounds like your idea of looping or cycling
Mm.
is very similar to that.
Yeah, that's a term. Dean Wesley Smith calls it cycling. I call it looping. You say tomato, I say tomato.
Right.
It's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I agree with what you said. I'll make one qualification.
Okay.
Me personally, Michael Laron's opinion only, is that you should do the best you can to write the best words you can the first time around.
Okay.
Now, not everybody can do that, and
Sure.
I recognize that. Not everybody wants to do that, and that's
Mhm.
fine. The reason I believe that is because it's just a lot easier and it's less work for you in the long run. I would much rather write a novel slower and get it right the first time than have to go back and do rewriting, because rewriting goes against everything that writing into the dark is all about, right? Because I just said in the beginning of this interview that writing into the dark and writing without an outline requires faith in yourself, right? It
Yeah.
requires you to trust yourself, trust your story, trust that your fingers are going to get to the right place at the end of the day. When you go back and you rewrite everything, you're basically saying you didn't trust yourself,
Yeah.
right? So spiritually, philosophically, however you want to define it, there's a mismatch there that I think you have to be careful of. So for me, I try to write as best as I can the first time around. Sure, am I going to go back? So I write 500 words and then I stop and I go back and I review that 500 words. Am I going to make some changes? Oh, you bet I'm going to make some changes.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to do the best job I can the first time around, because the looping really is about adding to or taking out, depending on your personality. Some people like to add stuff. Some people end up taking stuff out. It just depends on who you are, right? But ultimately, it's also about staying in touch with your story so that you can remember those little details as you're writing. So it serves a number of purposes, the least of which is just making sure that you get the words on the page.
It sounds like for you, the looping process is really taking your first and second draft as you go. When you
Exactly.
because you're going back and in essence editing as you go. When you finish a first draft or that initial draft, whatever you want to call it, what does your editing process look like from there? Do you is it clean at this point because you've developed a certain system that works for you? Do you wind up with a clean draft? Do you set it aside, give it some time, then go back and do another formal draft? What's the editing process look like?
Yeah, yeah. I have a reputation for kitchen clean manuscripts. I
Nice.
There's something to be said for me, just personally, my own quality of standards, that when I'm done, I'm done. So when I get
That's
to the
amazing.
end and I write the end, it's the end and it's going to my editor. Now, that's not to say that I won't go back and proofread
Yeah,
and look for typos, or
sure.
maybe I catch something at the 11th hour. I need to go back and fix some details here and there. Oh, sure. Everybody has that problem, right?
Yeah,
But I like to front load all of the work into my actual writing sessions so that everything that comes afterward is just window dressing. It's just tweaks around the edges to language, might be word choices here, adding some imagery here to make it a little bit more evocative,
yeah.
that sort of thing.
So when you say
So that's
you send it to your editor, is that just a basic line edit at that point?
yeah, yeah, copy
Just to
editor.
clean it up, clean up the spelling, typing, that sort of thing?
Exactly. And like I said, I have a pretty good reputation for creating clean manuscripts. And that's a skill that you develop over time.
Sure it
That's
is.
something that if you make a commitment to learning how to do it,
Right.
the way becomes clear. But it's not something that somebody with their first book is going to be able to do right out of the gate. I mean, there are
Of
some
course.
rare unicorns out there that can do it,
You're
but
right.
you learn things in working with your editors.
Of
you
course.
you
Of course.
learn what they are going to look for, the sort of mistakes that you make on a regular basis, and you start to learn to how to be on the lookout for those.
Yeah.
And so anyone can achieve cleaner manuscripts over time.
Well, it's also that Malcolm Gladwell concept of the 10,000 hours, just doing the work makes you an expert. It just does. You just get
Yeah.
better and better and better at it. And if you're if you're not consistently getting better at something, maybe you need to stop and ask yourself why this is not getting better.
Well, okay, but let's define better, because
Yeah,
this is one of the issues I think when I talk to writers. There are some writers that think that they know how to write and there's nothing else that they need to learn, right?
right.
And oh boy, that's fatal. Like you always have something to learn. I mean,
Always.
I've
Yeah,
seen interviews with the big dogs, Stephen King and Dean
yeah,
Koontz, and I mean they still admit that they're learning. So if the top practitioners of the craft haven't figured it all out,
yeah,
and you're saying you figured, there's something wrong there, right?
yeah,
But how do you define better? Right?
right,
How do you define that? Is it that you sell more books? Is it that you feel better when you're done? Is it There's no objective criteria in which to run a manuscript through and be able
right,
to say that it's better, other than it doesn't have as many typos as the last time around.
right,
So
right,
I think that this is a journey that you're never going to reach the destination. And taking classes from more experienced writers who are down the road, who have that experience, can help
right.
you see the way forward. But you've got to be willing to forget some things. Like, I've had to forget a lot of bad habits over the years, things that I thought were okay and were not,
Yeah.
and that requires an open mind and an open heart and some humility.
I was about to say, and keeping a dose of humility, consistent always is crucial. Um, Over the last decade or more since you've been writing and publishing, what things have changed? This is a two-part question about writing, because we know that if you want to write a novel, you literally can have loose leaf paper and a number two pencil, and you can write a novel. There are much easier ways to do it and tools that make our life as writers easier, and more productive and all that. So how have the tools changed for writing, and how do you see the landscape of publishing? A lot of things have happened. Do you feel like we're at a better place today, even though the market is more flooded and all of that? Do you feel like we're at a better place now than when the Kindle revolution first exploded a little over a decade ago?
Oh, you're gonna get me into some trouble, Hank.
That's
So
that's what I'm here for,
okay.
Michael,
Okay,
to
so let's you're my
to
wingman in
provoke.
trouble here. So my middle name is Danger, by the way. So particularly with the second part of your question. So let's take the first part of your question,
Okay.
which is a great question. Just about everything has changed in the last
Sure.
10 years. Okay, so it's 2024 now as we
Mhm.
record this. 10 years ago it was 2014. Let's talk about what the landscape for writing
Yeah.
looked
Yeah.
like 10 years, just the landscape for writing. Let's see what it looked like 10 years ago. It was primarily Microsoft Word
Yes.
or Scrivener.
Yes.
Those were, or LibreOffice, I think.
Yeah.
Those were the three writing apps that people had access to.
Yeah. Not
Pages
not
wasn't
even
around
sure if
back then.
Google Docs had debuted,
No,
or it was,
I don't
yeah,
think
it
they
was,
were. If
yeah.
they did, they were very, very early on, and
Right, right.
it wasn't something people
Yeah.
were actively using to write.
Yeah.
Those were
It
your three options.
Yeah, everybody started with Word. People discovered Scrivener, and,
Yep.
and then there were some outliers. Yeah.
Exactly. And there were a few other writing apps out there. I don't want to minimize their
Sure.
impact. And there were some people using them, but for the most part, those were your three big dogs.
Yeah.
Okay. In order to write, you had to be sitting in front of your computer.
Yes.
That, you could have a laptop. There are people that take laptops to coffee shops, that sort of thing. But writing on your tablet was unheard of. Writing on your phone certainly was unheard of.
Right.
And dictation, while it existed, it was relatively not used.
Yeah.
So just the process of writing a novel was quite homogenous 10 years ago. Everybody did it the same way. And if we could get a time machine and go back in time and say, hey, you can write novels on your phone. Hey, you can dictate. People would look at you like you were crazy, right?
Yes.
Formatting your book. So taking what you had written and formatting it into a finished product.
Mhm.
Totally different game, right?
Yeah.
You basically had two choices back then. You could use Microsoft Word or you could hire a formatter. Those were your choices 10 years ago. There was no Vellum, there
Yep.
was no Dabble, right?
Yep.
There those were your choices. And
Yep.
in order to format an ebook, you probably had to know a little bit of HTML or be willing to use a tool like Calibre or Sigil to do that. And
Yep.
so that was a little complicated. That was a Wild West back then.
Yep.
So I look at what we have now. We've got everything.
Yeah.
This is the best time in the history of the world to be a writer. Full
Yes.
stop. You
Yep.
know, if I could reincarnate Ray Bradbury or bring back Robert Louis Stevenson or insert the name of your favorite writer, they would first thing they would do is they would look for a newspaper and then they would ball it up and they would hit us over the head with it at the first time we complained because
Right.
life is so much easier.
Oh, yeah.
So, but we don't realize that and we don't appreciate that, I think, as much as we should. So
Ray Bradbury would say, "You have a writing implement in your pocket and you can't produce a short story every week?"
exactly. You can't do
Yeah.
my challenge. I already told you what to do. Now shut up and go write. That's what he would
Right.
say.
That's what he would say.
you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the first part of your question, which I think I've
Yeah.
sufficiently answered.
Sure.
The second part is where do I see publishing going? And um, I see it going a lot of different directions. There, I would be remiss not to mention the impact that AI has had on
Mhm.
writing. I think a lot of people have all sorts of feelings all across the spectrum of whether AI is the messiah or whether it's the devil incarnate. I'll let people make their own decisions on that. What
Yeah.
I will say is that we shouldn't be so quick to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
There are a
Absolutely
lot of
agree.
things that AI can do that make our lives better. So, for example, I talked about dictating, right? There are apps now, and they're not mainstream yet, but they will be in probably about 6 to 9 months, where you can dictate your book and you don't have to speak your punctuation. So you don't have to speak Dragonese. That's already present today. But they will also clean up your dictated text for typos. So if you make typographical errors, it will clean that up as part of the transcription process. How amazing is that?
Yeah,
Because
that's
one of the biggest pains in
phenomenal.
the butt for dictating is that you have to clean it all up, right? Anybody
Right.
who's ever had the unfortunate displeasure of having to clean up a dictated text, that's a thing of the past. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm encouraging people to really start thinking about a future where typos could be a thing of the past. And that's weird. That's
Yeah.
really, really weird to think
Yeah.
about. So there's that. There's also the process of being able to write a novel using AI. And again, I'll let people make their own decisions on whether they like that idea or not. But
Yeah.
there's certainly some merit in being able to run an idea through an AI and get ideas, use it for inspiration. Help if you choose to outline, have the AI poke holes in your outline. If you want to use AI as a sort of developmental editor, I think the tools for kind of the basics of that are already there.
Mhm.
I happen to use AI for to help me get realistic details a little bit more accurate. So,
Yeah.
like for example, if I've got a scene that's got, I don't know, I had a series where I had a main character who could turn into a rat, and I, I I did a lot of research on rodent biology, and I actually worked with a rodent biologist on some of those scenes. And I could also use ChatGPT, and ChatGPT would say, "Oh, well, this scene was written through the perspective of a rat. A rat probably wouldn't see it this way because their eyes are blah, blah, insert all these biological terms. It might be
Right.
more realistic if you said this, this, and this, and this." So take whatever subject matter you're writing about. AI can role play and potentially give you some ideas that you didn't consider to make your writing more evocative and realistic. I could go on
Yeah.
about different things that AI can do. And I ultimately think that the writer of the future is going to be one who uses technology as a cybernetic of sorts. So, someone who uses AI to become the best version of yourself
Right.
using AI technology that knows who you are, that can be personalized to suit your needs and preferences.
Right.
And moving forward, we're going to be able to connect with readers who have the capability of receiving that as well. So, book discovery, I think, is also going to change. Right now, you've got to go to Amazon and you've got to put in some keywords to be able to find
Yeah.
new books, right? Or you've got to join BookBub. And I think in the future, we're going to have an AI layer where people are going to have AI that is just an automatic recommendation engine that recommends things to them based on their own unique preferences. And, as Joanna Penn says all the time so eloquently, why do we have to put 7 keywords to get our book discovered when the whole book can be the metadata? That's a
Right.
whole nother can of worms that hasn't even been explored yet. But
Yeah.
AI today can read your book and examine and
Right.
understand what's going on in your book. So that's the future. That's the
Yeah.
future. So even if you're writing Brontosaurus romance, right? There's going to be a bunch of people out there who are going to want Brontosaurus romance. And through the use of AI and targeted discovery, we'll be able to find your books in ways that they can't find them today.
Right.
And so I really think we are fast moving into a future where everything is going to become even more specialized and targeted. And I hate to use this word, but balkanized a little
Yeah.
bit more than it is today, a lot more than it is today. And I think that what Chris Anderson talked about with his long tail theory, I think is right. And I think that that's going to bear itself out as we slowly start. I mean, Hank, when you log into Facebook,
Mhm.
you don't see the same thing I do,
Right.
right?
Right.
I'm willing to bet when your wife logs into Facebook, she doesn't see the same thing you do.
No.
So just within the same household, there's a fracturing of interests, right?
Sure.
Like
Sure.
when you and I grew up, everybody watched the same television shows.
Right.
Everybody had the same magazines. Everybody saw the same newspaper articles.
Yeah.
That's not happening anymore. Each
No.
person is in their own little universe.
Right.
That's the future. And so
Yeah.
the question is, how does your content fit into people's universes?
Well said. Well said. Michael, this has been a fun hour. It's always fun to get to hang out with you and talk, and yeah, I love these times where we don't have a uh an overarching theme per se, but we just get to talk because something good always comes out of it. Um for folks who are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you're up to, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
The best place to find me is at authorlevelup.com. That's got links to my YouTube channel, links to all my books for writers, links to all the things I'm doing out there in the interwebs. And for those who dare, if you're looking for an excuse to find a time to write, I do a monthly live stream called Power Hour, and it's 90 minutes. And I provide a space for people to show up and work on their work in progress. And you can join an engaged community of people. And I play some nice music. I put some timers on the screen. We all check in and celebrate each other's successes. And I do that on the first Saturday of the month. So if people are
Love,
interested in that, just find me on YouTube.
love. And your YouTube channel is also
Author Level
author
Up.
level up. Try saying that 3 times real fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Michael, always fun. Thank you for taking time to come on the show today.
Thanks, Hank. It's always been a pleasure.